God goes and he picks a person and then he literally sends them out like a robot and then puts words in their mouth and has them mouth those words.
As an oracle would.
Yes, as an oracle would. In fact, if you read any of the Old Testament writings, they presuppose a pattern of purification before illumination. The prophets were purified. They had this vision, and then they began to describe this vision in limited human words, so that to try to express this experience which was beyond their own capacity to communicate it.
And this process of being purified is a process of transforming human nature by means of its union with the divine. Yeah. Because the divine is, of course, so pure that we can't even begin to conceive how pure it is. And once it comes in contact with our fallen nature, which the fall created the impurity, and what we're talking about by impurity, we mean mortality, corruptibility. We're not just talking about a kind of moral impurity. We're talking about something much, much deeper that reaches human nature in all its aspects, the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual. And if those three elements, all of them, are brought into contact with the divine, they are inevitably going to be transformed if they are willing to be transformed.
And Jesus Christ showed us how.
Not only showed us how, but he is in fact the transformation. And by our contact with him, we are transformed. And this is an entirely different concept of the relationship between man and Christ than you have in the West, which has this appeasement kind of thing. And in the Eastern sense, the Orthodox sense, this glorification is a change in human nature because of its contact with the divine. In the West, there really isn't a change. You're left in basically the state in which you're found. You're just forgiven for being there. And so
what the Protestants call imputed righteousness. You don't attain the righteousness of Christ. It's imputed to you. It's like it's stamped on you, or it covers you, so that when God looks at you, he doesn't see you, he sees Christ. And many Protestants explain their theory of redemption based upon this notion of imputed righteousness, because they themselves realize that according to their own standards of appeasement, they do not measure up. So they say, well, how can God save us if we fail to appease him? So then they say, well, Christ, his righteousness now has been imputed to us, and therefore now, because we are being covered by Christ, when he looks at us, now he sees Christ. And I've heard many Protestants explain it this way. I mean, this is silliness, and according to the Western, according to the Eastern Orthodox understanding.
Yeah, it's as if you were wearing a mask instead of being really you.
Well, that's why he calls the Bible a closed book, from the viewpoint of these Western Christian confessions and Jews. It would be sort of like going to a doctor or a hospital emergency room, and the doctor says, take off your clothes, put on this gown. And then the doctor never comes back because you're not cured.
Yeah, and this is considered to be your visit.
You'll be all right now.
Yeah, just because you've changed your clothes.
Well, let's go on with this quote, unless you have something else to add. Okay, this means, as we were saying before, for this reason the Bible is a closed book to all others. This means as a guide to the said cure. For this reason, the Bible is a closed book, and this also means that the Jews who accept the Old Testament alone, or Christians who accept both the Old and the New Testament, are yet not in the process of being cured under the guidance of one already cured. In other words, glorified, and automatically and unknowingly distort these books into supports for the sickness of religion rather than its cure.
Yeah, the sickness of religion. I mean, this is one of his central points, that there is this mistake that is made by fallen man of taking his present state and projecting it onto God, and this present state is a sickness of taking something which is in this world and trying to interpret something which is totally different and has to be if it's going to transform what's in this world and save it and cure it, and it leaves it the same.
And that's why if you're reading the book, the Bible, and you're trying to understand what it says, and yet you're not in this state of glorification, it's impossible for you to understand what it's saying, because the book was written by people that were in this state. And so they're trying to describe a reality that the fallen human nature is incapable of understanding. And they're trying to use human words, limited human understanding, to try to express this reality to us. And we're now trying to figure it out when we ourselves don't have any knowledge of what they're talking about. And so it becomes, so you pick and choose, you do what they do. You pick the pieces out of it that you do understand.
Or that serve your particular purpose, like Charlemagne.
And then everything else that confuses you, you just either simply ignore, or you don't even think about.
And the result is you distort.
Mm-hmm.
You distort the basic message.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into this forgiveness thing and this appeasement. As I said at the end of the last session, in Orthodox, in the Orthodox world, there's the famous quote from St. Athanasius: "God became man in order that man might become God." All right. To the West, this is something almost blasphemous, because they cannot conceive of man achieving that kind of state, because, of course, they have no experience of it.
That's why to the Western Christian, they'll say, the Beatitude, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." For them, seeing God is some future event at the second coming. They don't believe it's possible in this present life for anyone to have seen God. And when St. Paul talks about seeing through a mirror darkly, and then we shall see face to face, they don't believe that that experience of seeing God face to face is possible this side of the second coming, this side of the resurrection.
And even then, they interpret it as being God is here and you're here. You're still separate. Whereas seeing God in the Father's terminology is theosis. Theosis, seeing God. But this means not looking at God, but in effect being united with God.
Acquiring the Holy Spirit.
Acquiring the Holy Spirit, being transformed, acquiring the divine nature.
As a number of...
By grace. Now, of course, not by
yes.
nature. We don't achieve it on our own. We do it because God grants it to us and infuses it into us through Christ. And this is what is the state of glorification. The West has an entirely different, as he was saying, concept of what this whole process is. And I can think of one very good example, which is very early in the West, and it's a book by a man named St. Anselm of Canterbury, and a saint in the Western Church. And he wrote a book called Cur Deus Homo, Why Did God Become Man? Which is obviously directly in line with what St. Athanasius had said, what was it, I guess 700 years before.
When was St. Anselm?
And St. Anselm was around the year 1000, 1100, in that period. And his answer to this question, St. Anselm's answer to this question, was a whole concept of appeasement of the honor of God. It was the idea that basically what had to happen was that God is as this offended honor. And in this sense, he's just like a Frankish warlord whom you have not served properly. Therefore, his honor has been impinged upon, and you have to pay him back somehow for this. Mm-hmm. And of course, no man can pay back God, because God's honor is infinite and man is finite. So the answer is you have to get God to pay God back. In other words, you have to get Christ to pay God back on the cross.